Hey now. So you'll notice I'm just a little vain, just a little. I don't like looking down in the camera, but this is more important. So, and it's so nice. Y'all have no idea. I mean, it's summer, but it feels like spring. It's really great right now out here. So, whatever. This one is very important, and I call it We Must See the Fall. Now, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for over a year, and I put pen to paper. So again, I might struggle. I read this beforehand to make sure that I can read my own handwriting. I write very sloppy. Well, you can see it. Now, I used to be a very neat writer until I went to college and taking notes. So this is how I write. But this is very important because right now I was just watching Nicole Wallace and and I think I've said this before. I don't miss her show or Rachel or Joy and or Tiffany Cross or Chris Hayes usually and Lawrence. I watch a lot of news, by the way. But anyway, people are like, what? How do we push back? All right, so we haven't talked since the Capitol riots, since the insurrection on January 6th. We haven't talked about Mitch McConnell and again the 50 Republicans who didn't have the balls to even investigate the attack on the Capitol that threatened their own lives. I've saw the video of them each running one by one as the Capitol Hill police fought off a crowd, a mob threatening to kill him just yards away. But it's been 5 months, so what's the big damn deal? Okay, so we're a little off track. I told you I got a lot. I've been thinking, I've been saying all this, but this is important because it may seem kind of tangential, but it is definitely important to understand. And I call this We Must See the Fall. And I mean that literally. So I'm going to read this to you. This is extraordinary documentary that I watched on the History Channel before Sinclair Broadcasting took it over. Since Sinclair took it over, I can't tell half the time if they're for or against Nazis. I digress. But before then, I watched History Channel a lot because they dug into a lot of actual American history that I didn't know. And sometime maybe, I don't know, I remember whenever the economy fell in 2008 and I was unemployed for an extended period of time for the first time and living on unemployment. So I was home and I saw a documentary about World War II and realized I didn't know much about it. I knew about Pearl Harbor. I knew all the headlines about Nazis, about Hitler, about the Holocaust, but the actual war itself, how it started, when it started precisely, because it didn't just start, when we jumped in 1941. And so it's weird how long before there was Trump fascism in America, who knew? Like I was drawn to this part of history. And so I found myself, I've watched a lot of documentaries, and then this one came on that has stuck with me ever since. And I tell people about this a lot. And it's a two-part documentary. The first part is called The Rise of the Third Reich. Some of you might have seen this. And then the second part is The Fall of the Third Reich. Now, this documentary uses incredible, amazing footage caught on home videos from the German people as Hitler rose to power and as the Nazi menace fell. Often the narrator of the documentary says things like, if you were a German in 1938 Berlin, ... And it would show how Jews were being ransacked and marched off to ghettos and work camps. But if you were German, you were going on Nazi-sponsored cruises and vacations. Everyone had a job and meat in every pot. It was good times if you were German. And so I want to clear this up. My brother asked me this, and I was kind of irate because I was nothing personal, but I mean, you know that. But I hear this a lot, and people use words. I'm a wordsmith. Words mean things, and socialism, that word, how they kind of equate it to Nazis on the right wing. The Nazis called themselves the National Socialist Party. Socialism, in essence, is what we do when we collect taxes to pay for roads and bridges. Everybody contributes so that we pay for public goods, things that we all use. Now, we all have our private money that we pay for our own private things, but then we also pay taxes for the society as a whole. Socialist governments, everything is social. We're not that, but we are a democracy as our construct, as the way our government is structured. But we do have socialism in this country, as written in our Constitution, for the general welfare of the public, not for the greater good, like in communism, for the public good, for the better of all of us. All right. So when the Nazis called themselves the National Socialist Party, they weren't talking about socialist for everybody. Everybody went on a Nazi-sponsored cruise. Jews weren't allowed on that cruise. But if you were an Aryan, you were part of the National Socialist Party. You got to partake in all of the things they were robbing from the Jews and spreading out to the other Aryans in Germany. So that's where the idea of socialism has been perverted and perverse. So that's the Nazi-sponsored cruise. That was what the National Socialist Party, that's how they pitched themselves to regular Germans. Look, aren't you having a good life? Look, isn't this great? I mean, before Hitler came to power, and for decades after World War I, Germany, we didn't have a Marshall Plan. We didn't, there was a Marshall Plan, but it didn't get enacted. And so basically the world defeated Germany, and then everybody went back to their borders. Well, the German people were destitute. There was no money, no economy. I mean, people were eating dirt and rocks and shit to live. People were there, like I think something like the statistic was like half of the population was dying annually from famine after the First World War. So it was the prime breeding ground for a despot like Hitler to say, you know why you're broke and destitute? Those people. Look at, see anything familiar in America right now, people? Those people, it's the Jews. They've stolen all your money, and that's why you're broke and hungry. Not because they tried to do a Nazi and take over all of Europe. And then the world said, what the hell are you doing? No, it was the Jews, and that's their fault. And so it's within our right to take all the shit they've been stealing from us. That's how you get the Nazis ransacking Jews and stealing all their shit and putting them in ghettos and killing them. Genocide. All right. So, as I was saying, if you were a German, and that was a running theme throughout the first part, and it would show the contrast. If you were a Jew, this is what you were going through, and it was heinous and horrific. But if you were German and you didn't live near Jewish people and you didn't see it, it was great times swimming in pools. I mean, they had home videos, and I mean, 5 years earlier, they were eating dirt. Now they got big meat, and they're having Christmas with gifts and toys, and whatever he did something great. So you had those mesmerized, googly-eyed Hitler idiots all over the country. They fooled them. They lied and deceived them. And so, getting back to what I wrote. But as the war progressed, the Nazis became more and more violent. See, my hair's starting to dry. But as the war progressed, Nazis became more and more violent, taxed the German people to the point they were mixing sawdust with flour to make food last. I mean, as the fall, right? The good times had stopped rolling. They became the victims of the menace they embraced, despite the terror and destruction that the same government was inflicting on the rest of the world. The first part is hard to watch as Nazis and Hitler just keep rising and rising, or in modern terms, winning and winning. And even though in 2021, I know they are defeated in the end, Nazis are defeated in the end, watching that documentary shows just how long the world had to endure this evil. It seems as if it will never end. They will never be defeated. I mean, they take over, Poland and France and Belgium, and I mean, the Nazis were just all of Europe. It was crazy, and then into Africa, and then trying to get into Britain. And guess who was next, right? And then we get to watch the fall of the Third Reich, when Japan bombed Hawaii, attacking the US on our soil. It drew us into the war at last. And all of the hopelessness felt watching the rise turned into hope as we watch the fall. It's a mayfly. Some giant mosquitoes freaking me out. Here's one of the lessons for our times that I've gleaned from that documentary. We have to see the fall in order. We have to see the fall in order to defeat Trump fascism in America. We have to broadcast the downfall. That means showing that ugly idiot as he loses wealth, freedom, and power. It takes calling the officers of the fascist coup, like Ted Cruz, like Josh Hawley, and on and on and on, what they are: complicit in aiding and abetting domestic terrorists. There are fascist appeasers today, just like in Nazi Germany. There were, I say this all the time, Dunkirk and Darkest Hour. I recommend watching those two movies to everyone, because Americans should feel ashamed compared to the Brits. I will give it to them. God bless them for holding that line. All those years that Churchill kept pressing FDR, and in FDR's defense, he knew what the Nazis were, and he wanted to get the US involved long before Pearl Harbor, but the American people didn't want to get involved. American people in 1933, when Hitler rose to power, thought, what's the big deal? That's a European problem. That ain't our problem. Like only a third of the country cared about it or thought we should do anything about it. By the 1939, when France had fallen and everything else, Americans were still like, it's a European war. Why are we getting it? I mean, FDR tried to pass, Brits were like, can you at least give us some planes and tanks? We need fuel. Can you at least give us something to help us fight this war? And FDR tried to get legislation passed to get them that. And the Congress said, no, we ain't involved in that war. FDR snuck resources to the Brits through Canada. Yeah, I learned that from all the shit I've been gathering for decades. But it wasn't until Pearl Harbor, till we were actually bombed, that Americans were like, what the fuck, right? Now we're in it. But up until then, there were, I mean, Churchill was really, you watch Darkest Hour, Dunkirk puts us to shame because their soldiers, British soldiers, were trapped right at between the enemy and the ocean. The enemy on the ocean, the enemy on shore. And they needed help to get out. And so what Churchill did was call the citizens, everyday people like me, like anybody, all my neighbors here pulling in after work, called them all and said, hey, if you got a boat, can you meet us in the channel? We got to go rescue our boys from Dunkirk, from the Nazis. Yeah. And guess what? They did it. They rescued all of their troops. There were some 100,000 troops, 200, like almost the 200,000, almost the entire British army was stuck over there. And so their citizens who they were there protecting, and the rest of the world, by the way, got in their sloops and their schooners and their little tugboats and their little private yachts, and got on the ocean and went to Dunkirk and rescued their troops. Can you imagine America doing this right now? You've got a general, a so-called general, Michael Flynn, talking about over Memorial Day weekend that we should have a Myanmar-style coup here in America. Can you imagine the American people? American people, you could even rally us to wear fucking masks to protect each other from dying. Dunkirk puts us to shame. Wow, what? That's patriotism. So you know. But anyway, darkest hour, Churchill. There were appeasers all around him and in their parliament. And he's like, well, hell, you know, they're like, maybe we should make a deal. Hitler says we can keep everything we have. We can still operate our own government if we just go ahead and give in. So why don't we just give in rather than have them take over like they did everywhere else? You know, France did the same thing, appeased. And guess what? They put people in concentration camps. They took over like they did everywhere else. And so Churchill was like, no. We went and talked to the British people. British people was like, hell no. We're not laying down. Don't give in. Their parliament was like, we should probably make a deal. The people were like, fuck no. We will be lying. And Churchill was like, we will be lying until every Brit is lying in a pool of drowning in their own blood. And the people said, yes, that's what we mean before we turn our country over to Nazis. And so they didn't. And so they chose to fight. And so they lived with years under a blitzkrieg with German planes dropping bombs on them, blackouts and all of that, rations. And it was dangerous. It was a hard choice to make. And they were stuck, begging for our help. France had gone to the Germans. There was the Allies that defeated them. It was just the Brits for the longest until Pearl Harbor. And that got us into it. And that's when the fall began to happen. And so just like in Nazi Germany, we have appeasers here. There are people in Congress, there are 11 senators, if you want to call them that, from the Republican Party didn't even show up to vote on a commission to investigate the Capitol Hill riot and insurrection on January 6th. 11 of them out of 50 didn't even show up to vote. Only 6 voted for a commission to investigate, to find out what the hell happened and who all was involved. And so how does a vote 56 to 35 lose? Not in a democracy, not when majority rules. Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema. There are appeasers in our Congress, in our government. They're afraid of their constituents. Some of them wanted to vote for it. That's why they just didn't show up. Because they know if they voted for it, they go home and they got their own Nazi thugs in their own districts ready to come threaten their lives, threaten their families. You know how long Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Nancy Pelosi, and a lot of Black women in Congress have been threatened by your same hoogies and fascists for years? You know how many threats President Obama had to endure because you kept calling him a Kenyan president and made him the other to those same hoogies and fascists? But yet they still stand for what they stand for, and they still vote for what they believe in. And y'all ain't got the balls because you scared of them. You done riled them up. They're crazed with violence. And you're like, well, shit, if I vote for it, they're going to come and get me and my family. You little punk bitches, you little dweebs. You just, in the words of Donald Williams, you a fucking bum, bro. So anyway, there are appeasers just like in Nazi Germany that need to be called that. They need to be called out, and everyone involved in the insurrection on January 6th has to be perp walked to prison in the same way that we saw Derek Chauvin perp walked out of that courtroom. It is important for us as a society not to soften or whitewash the fall. The fall has to be swift, hard, and it's not swift enough. Already we're 5 months in. It's not swift. It has to be hard and swift and without mercy. Otherwise, the same forces of evil undergirding the fascists of our time will continue to fester under the surface until they find another leader. Watching the fall and cheering the fall of fascism in America is not only morally righteous, it is the patriotic thing to do. Thank you.